Not every great project starts with a polished plan. Sometimes it begins with a closed down church and a question. Could this be something more? That's what today's episode is about. Not just vision, but action. Today we're diving into a powerful story out of Columbus, Ohio, where Ben Sears and the Star House team took a shutdown church and are converting it into a drop-in center for young adults exiting homelessness. This one's for the locals doing big work that no one's clapping for yet. The ones navigating city bureaucracy, NIMBY, not in my backyard neighbors, all while holding on to their mission.
I work for a nonprofit here in Columbus, Ohio called Star House, and I'm our vice president of expansion. So we exist to partner with teens and young adults as they exit homelessness and thrive in a community of hope. So we knew in 2018, we knew we wanted to launch into this housing space and didn't really know what that looked like. And at that point, there was a former hotel on the west side of Columbus that was a nuisance property, and the city of Columbus had shut that down. And then partnering with our housing authority and then finance fund, which is a local CDFI, Star House launched into this development project. And we're a minority partner on this project. We have 25% ownership. And then the two other partners split the rest. And we have no revenue off of rent on this project. So we raise for services on support on site for case management, therapy, on-site access to employment, and any other supports our residents might need. And it has been really successful. We've had over 95% capacity over the last several years. So my role was formed, and I kind of came on to say, okay, how can we as an organization, as a nonprofit, which is not common, look at becoming a developer? We want to make sure we're a majority owner and grow to do more of this work as we expand. So project specific for that one was a adaptive reuse former hotel 62-unit project-based voucher community. Currently, underway and about to close on a former Catholic church and school, which will be our second location drop-in center.
Yes, that's an interesting story in its own. And you're leading the entitlement charge, working with the jurisdiction, consultants, and all of that.
I'm going to start with Christy's, one of her favorite things to say too. It's like local leaders and local relationships matter. And for Star House, that is honestly what has brought all these opportunities our way, is we do really good work in the community, but our team has really good relationships. Here in Central Ohio, our Catholic diocese was closing a couple churches, and there was a member of this church on the south side, St. Ladislas Church, that was one of our co-founders way back in 2006. And they came to us and said, hey, we have this beautiful 26,000 square foot church on the south side of Columbus that we would love to see Star House expand into. And we went through this whole process identifying how this space could work for what we do, working initially with some construction partners, some architects. We evaluated the building. We had probably like a 10-month purchase contract as we went through all the evaluation, environmental and architectural review and feasibility studies, and kind of partnering, going through zoning, which, my goodness, that whole process was eye-opening. But we did really well. And again, relationships mattered through the whole thing, even though the process took time and it cost money.
Ben says it over and over. Relationships matter. But let's get specific. He wasn't just another applicant showing up to zoning hearings. He was already the person local leaders turned to when someone needed help. That's what makes the difference. By the time Star House submitted their plans, the city and community already knew who they were and why their work mattered. Maybe break down the behind the scenes of how does that dynamic work? Because a lot of times people will go, whoa, I have to present to these commissions. They're intimidating, and maybe humanize them a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So for one, the one woman who was the zoning chair on the area commission, I had connected with probably 4 or 5 years ago because I was doing outreach with individuals living outside in her side of town. So I was like her go-to person. When somebody was living outside or in the south side area, she'd call me and say, hey, Ben, can you go connect with this person? So we already had like this little relationship. And she was the zoning chair. So when she found out I was working for Star House, we grabbed coffee and I shared more about the mission when she was somewhat familiar and shared about our plans. And like that helped launch this relationship. So then it was 3 phases, right? The first one I met in this little church basement with like 10 neighbors. I shared what we were going to do, and they unanimously passed it, right? The second phase was the zoning committee came out and did a site walk with us. This was a variance of the zoning just to get the use from the church over to the drop-in center. So thankfully, we didn't need to change zoning. So we moved through that process really quickly. And the final one, you go and present in front of the whole group of, the area, one of the commissioners on the south side. Like my project, I didn't even say, I think at that meeting, I didn't say anything. And part of it was there's this out of state developer that's trying to do this crazy big 12-story project in a residential like neighborhood. And everybody's been like losing their mind over this guy. And he's really abrasive. And he was there to present as well. So he sucked all the energy away from me. And I just rolled in there and they passed it.
It is so beautiful when you have projects like that and they go on for hours and then yours comes up and everyone is drained at that point.
So then, then they move it to the city and these things just take forever. And we had some parking issues because they had, for our use, the parking wasn't where it needed. So we needed a parking variance. And then, so we're working with the architect and we're working with our attorney and then like having to finalize the contract with the architect. As you know, I was sending that to you and they're amazing. Like all these people are great. It's just, I feel bad because, we're negotiating legal details and things that aren't necessarily important in my mind.
Well, I want to get into the negotiation of that after the public hearings, because that's another thing where people are hesitant to ask the architect or the engineers for clarification to understand. But as far as the hearings go, when you say it's lengthy, maybe a little bit more into the process of you put in the application and is it a waiting period? Are you noticing neighbors? Are you getting any kind of public comment back? What does that look like before you finally get in front of the board?
Yeah. Yeah. So going way back when, our attorney submitted the application for zoning, and then we moved to the area commission, and the area commission sent their recommendation to city council, and then it goes to staff, or no, it's the city, and then you have the staff on the building and zoning, and we got, this one guy, and he initially came back super quick, but then we were working on our end and it was mostly around parking. And we were working our end to respond to him. We got delayed. And then I think he just said, well, if they're not going to move fast on it, I'm not going to move fast on it. So then we were hitting up, towards our purchase contract timeline. And then we needed to start reaching out. So we had some people that worked in the city and some pretty high level, housing roles that kind of were able to help move things along for us. But around that whole process, we had no community complaints, no anybody coming out to like push back to us. But I was also going to tons of meetings on the south side, and I was presenting our project. I was meeting with everybody I could during this time, just to kind of like make sure that nobody had any assumptions about the project that weren't true, and then also share like this is the good that we're doing in the community. And I think that helped a lot as well. So we finally get on the agenda for council, and we did have to get a 30-day delay on our purchase contract extension on our contract, just because scheduling. I think there's just all these little things that I wish I knew, that I thought the other experts that were around supporting us would like catch, like the 2-week timeline before, or delay before we have to get on the agenda. They had to, just so I guess the public can see that. Would have been nice to know. That was just a little one that caught us.
Or you miss the deadline to submit a certain application and it sits on their desk for another week until they get to it or whatever. Like there's all these different small things. It's like if you don't get it in by Tuesday at 4 p.m., then it's going to get looked at next Tuesday at 4 p.m. and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So,
and it's one of those things that's like, that's not universal, right? Because now we're trying to do a project in Toledo and I'm talking to their plans commission and it's all different. Everything's different.
Our industry does a great job of having 10 words for the exact same thing. So what a specific part of Columbus or whatever might call something, Gahanna or Dublin or Grove City might call it different.
So we finally get to the day that we're on the council agenda, and I was confident because we had almost every city council member had been to the building. I have good relationships with several of them, but I still didn't know what to expect. And so I walk in there, and I knew a couple other people that had their projects going through that I kind of chatted with. And then my attorney did show up, and she was there, and we were prepared to make a comment. And again, there was 3 other developments that had opposition in the room and their attorneys, and they had these big presentations. And I'm like, are we going to have to do that? Like, because they're going first. And there was all this pushback and stuff. And, it was just really a process. But then they get up to call our project. And one of our council members, who I've known for a little while, basically spends 2 minutes to talk about the amazing work that Star House does in the community. He mentions me by name and just moves to pass it without a second reading. And they do that. And then we're done. And I'm like, okay, all that for this 2 minutes of nothing.
That is the absolute best possible outcome you could ever ask for in a hearing, where you are fully prepared to go to war, to battle, to fight for your project, and you realize all of the work that you've done the past 8 to 10 months to get to this point has paid off because it's now fully approved. I had one public hearing, and it was a massive hydrogen project in California. Same thing. We didn't have to say a word. And one of the guys who works for me, he's like, are they always like this? I'm like, no, definitely not. But this is a result of all of the hard work that goes in. So that's to your guys' credit for building that reputation in the community to where, no, this is a community asset. And that's where this all ties together. There's a lot of times developers come in, drop down their project because they want to make a lot of money. And even if they need this project to be exactly this to make it pencil, that's the perception that comes out, that the community, the council members all look at it and go, you're just the big bad evil developer jamming another project down our throats and we don't have a say. Whereas the project you're bringing is a well-rounded project. You're helping the community and you're creating a better place. Here's what most people miss. Community support doesn't magically show up at the final hearing. Ben showed up at neighborhood meetings, met with zoning chairs, built real relationships with people who had a stake in the outcome. So when it came time for a vote, they didn't just approve it, they championed it. That's the power of doing it with the community, not to the community.
Regarding the project itself, so you've been able to get it past that entitlement period. Where are you at right now? Have you guys been able to start the construction process?
Yeah, so after we got the approval, and we met all of the requirements for the purchase contract, including some nonprofit specifics like board approval and different things that we had, baked in there to protect us. And then we had to bid out to our construction partners. And thank goodness I have this amazing advisor. I have this whole team of advisors that have all specialties that I need here. But our construction advisor, he's basically our owner's rep, and he's got, 20, 30 years of experience in construction space. He wrote this RFP to give us the leverage, and then we bid it out to 5 companies. That process was eye-opening as well. I think we set it for 30 days. So they would bring crews through the building. I'd give them tours, and they'd have MEP contractors and everyone walking through the space and estimating and building out a budget estimate for the project. And then we had these in-person interviews, and it was like our facilities manager, our finance team, some other members on our team, and it was just really cool. And I felt like we were really well positioned to get a good deal, right? 3 of the companies came in almost the same across the board. Then we went back for a best and final offer, and they made things even better. We ended up going with somebody that I think they've done several church renovations recently. They're a really large company for this size project, but they really want to take it on, and it's meaningful to them.
And it sounds like you didn't just go for cost. You were interviewing them to make sure they're in this for the long haul and that you're not going to be change ordered to death when you get into construction.
Yeah, no, our owner's rep made them bring in their superintendent they're putting on the project, and we interviewed that guy, and he was talking to him about, day-to-day kind of stuff and what this guy looked like, what this person's personality was like, because we're going to be working with him for, next 12 months or so.
That's awesome. So you've gotten through the process of selecting the contractor that's going to help you bring your vision to life. Is construction scheduled to be started, or is it already underway?
We are getting ready to close on the property.
Okay.
We're ready to close. We've signed the contract for pre-construction, and then the way that they're going to do it, they're going to do pre-construction and do all the work with our architect design team and do some design build with our HVAC and electrical teams coming in. And then they're going to bid it out, and we're going to get a guaranteed maximum price. And if we move through without delay, we're expecting to have that by late, August, September.
Through this experience, and obviously you guys are not close to being done yet, but it's going to be an exciting time once it is done. What advice would you give to people who are looking to maybe follow along and do a adaptive reuse project on a former church in other markets?
Yeah, so an adaptive reuse advice, as far as what's helped me just as a person that's been in the homelessness space and not really the development space, is I have these amazing advisors that were already, most of them were either in my network or really close to my network to begin with. And, I met with so many people that have been in this space. And that initially was like, hey, teach me something. We have my construction expert. We've got a guy who owns a regional business. We have a woman who owns this really large architectural design company. We've got a guy who owns a chain of coffee shops. My finance guy, we've got a whole amazing team of people. One, get your experts, right? And just learn from them, because you're not going to know everything, at all. So you got to have your team of people. And then those relationships in the community, just building with the local neighbors, understanding, because this is a Catholic church that's been here for 70 years. There's so much history and feelings and emotions around this church.
So let's talk about what's really happening here. Ben didn't come from a development background, but he knew enough to ask for help. He pulled in advisors across construction, design, and finance. He created clear roles, brought in an owner's rep, and ran a competitive contractor bid process with purpose. This wasn't about finding the lowest number. It was about finding a team who believed in the mission and would show up for the long haul. That's how you build a project that lasts.
Yeah. So when it's all said and done, how, I guess, the vision of this particular project, what does the completed form look like?
It's going to be a whole campus, and we're going to phase it. So the first phase is we're going to replicate, and it'll be our second drop-in center. So it's 24/7 drop-in center. Any young person experiencing homelessness can come and get immediate access. So we're taking the former sanctuary, and then there's a lower level that had a kitchen cafe, and we're going to make that as like our drop-in center space, to where any young person can have like free roam of that space. And then there's a school that was attached that will be, kind of our social service hub, if you will. Like our case management and therapy offices will be there. A lot of community partners can come on site. And then there's this large room that we're going to make like a workforce development center. So that's for our young people that are experiencing homelessness, but also for a young person living in the neighborhood. Once we can fully develop that and build it out, they can come and access employment or training right there on site as well. There's a former convent house. It's like a 5-bedroom, like 3,500 square foot house that we're interviewing or, talking to several partners to either rent that space out for commercial use or potentially for housing on site. And then for another future phase, there's a parking lot, a separate adjacent parking lot that we look to do a second phase housing development on in the future. So there's a lot going on. There's also a community center, like a day center for anybody, any age across the street that houses several nonprofits that we're going to partner with really closely, but they've got childcare, they've got a gym and different things as well. So a big vision. I think investing in those kind of local relationships has been important. We do have a mission. We need to win the hearts and minds of everybody to be a champion for you. And that's where these opportunities come.
I absolutely love your energy, your wealth of knowledge, and you share everything that you've learned. You've already made a huge impact, and you're going to continue to make a huge impact on our communities. This is what thinking like a developer really looks like. It's not about knowing everyone. It's about staying curious, building trust, and figuring it out as you go. Ben and the Star House team are proving that adaptive reuse, community-rooted design, and mission-driven development aren't just buzzwords. They're the future. So if you're standing in front of a building that's been written off and wondering if it could be something more, the answer is yes, and you don't have to do it alone. If you love this minisode and want more boots-on-the-ground stories from real people building in their own backyard, subscribe to the Local Real Estate Developer Podcast on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.